Welcome back. In our last video, I introduced you to this concept of rhetoric, and then I inundated you with readings about rhetorical considerations, about what rhetorical analysis is, and I also gave you a reading that detailed what CTE is and why this is such a problem in the NFL. That is what you call a rhetorical exigence. It is a pressing problem that has led people to create opinionated articles about it. Shoemaker's article about CTE is not an op-ed. It's mostly informational. However, when you reach the instructions for the rhetorical analysis paper on the next page, you'll see I'm giving you 3 different op-eds to choose from. They're all about the problem of CTE in the National Football League. You will choose one and only one and provide a rhetorical analysis of it. So in the readings, there was 2 different readings devoted entirely to the rhetorical appeals, and this is an important part of the assignment. Indeed, you will need to devote an entire paragraph to writing about appeals to logos in the article you chose, an entire paragraph to writing about appeals to ethos, an entire paragraph to writing about appeals to pathos. The discussion board this week will give you an opportunity to practice that kind of analysis and to look at analytical writing from other students who are interested in the same article as you are. This should lead to better papers when it's time to submit the final draft. So let's go ahead and get into this. This is the second half of the Prezi that we started in the previous video, right? So English class is not the only place you're going to be called upon to do analytical writing. Many of you will be asked to do it in other college courses or even in your profession, in your career, as I was asked to do when I worked for University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. An analysis is understanding something by looking closely at how the individual parts work, right? And so, of course, if you're someone who likes to think about what the lyrics of a song means, if you've ever gotten in a discussion or even an argument with a friend of yours about what a particular song means, you're doing analysis there. You're looking at the individual parts, the lyrics, the chorus, to try to understand what the overall meaning of the piece is. The same can be done with film, poems, art, and as we are going to be doing for me with rhetoric, right? So you can look at an argument, because that's what rhetoric is. You can look at an argument, look at the different parts of it to determine how it works, what makes it effective, okay? And that's why I said in the previous video, you're not going to be giving your opinion about CTE. You're not going to be giving your opinion about the NFL. You're going to write about how the author of the article that you chose delivers their argument, how they use the rhetorical appeals and rhetorical considerations to create an effective argument. Okay, and indeed, as we talked about in the previous video, there are lots of different kinds of rhetoric out there, right? The things you will have to choose from for my rhetorical analysis paper, they're op-eds, they're short articles you find in a newspaper. Interestingly enough, you also find political cartoons in newspapers sometimes, right? So this is multimodal rhetoric. It is words and images that are designed to create an argument, right? And so here, in this very brief form, this artist is able to create an argument that suggests that the NFL knew all along that concussions were a problem, and instead of addressing it, they attempted to sweep it under the rug. You can see Roger Goodell here, who's the commissioner of the National Football League, lifting up the artificial turf rug to conceal the evidence of the deaths that have happened as a result of CTE. Interestingly enough, and don't worry, you're not writing about a political cartoon for me. That's a 102 assignment. But as you can see here, even if you're not a fan of the NFL and you don't know that the commissioner is Roger Goodell, even if you don't recognize him here, the author has included the artist, pardon me, has included this so that you don't get confused, so that you know who this represents, right? This is called an appeal to logos. It's a fact to help you make sense of the argument. Of course, Roger Goodell didn't really sweep skulls under the artificial turf, but the artist depicted things this way to make you disgusted, perhaps, or angry, or concerned. These are called appeals to pathos. They are emotional appeals. Successful arguments almost always have all three of those rhetorical appeals: logos, ethos, and pathos. There are many other rhetorical appeals, but those three are the ones we're going to be focusing on in this class. Okay, so that's just an example, right? And there is, like I said, there's two different readings about these appeals. I would encourage you to be sure you do them before you wade into writing the paper, because I can never capture all of that in this short Prezi, though I do attempt to synthesize some of it. Okay, so of course, a lot of students are put off by the terminology, logos, ethos, and pathos. The words sound strange because they are Greek. They were coined by the Greek philosopher Aristotle, who was prized for his expertise in arguments. Indeed, he taught argument in ancient Greece, one of the world's first democracies. So, of course, you can imagine how important rhetoric was as then for them as it is for us in any democracy where we get things done with words instead of force. And so he's the one that outlined the rhetorical appeals. And so you've got to get comfortable with the terminology. You will need to use the words logos, ethos, and pathos in your paper. It's really pretty much impossible to do a rhetorical analysis without writing about the rhetorical appeals, right? Indeed, you'll spend a whole paragraph on each of these. So what are appeals to logos? Logos, look at the root of the word here, L-O-G, kind of like logic. Appeals to logos are when authors use reasoning to persuade the audience, statistics, facts, definitions, the use of examples. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and reference some of the three articles that you have to choose from to write the paper about, even though they're on the next page, because of course you can come back and watch this video anytime you want. In the Marvin Washington article, he wants to convince you that despite all this concern about CTE, that the NFL is doing a lot of good things and they're making it safer. Some of the facts that he uses to convince you of this, his appeals to logos, have to do with the rule changes that the NFL has made, right? They are his proof that things are getting safer, right? All three of those articles have many different examples of all three of these rhetorical appeals, so I don't have a problem mentioning a few of them here, right? So, and anyhow, keep in mind, it's not just these three op-eds we're talking about. This is pretty much really any successful argument. We could do a rhetorical analysis of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech if I wanted to, and it would include all three of these appeals. And indeed, he has a very heightened sense of audience. If you want to, again, if you want to read more about audience, that's in the readings, because that's part of that rhetorical considerations writing that you're going to want to have in this paper as well, in addition to one paragraph each about the appeals. Okay, so I think most people understand kind of intuitively that if you're going to convince somebody of something, you need some facts, you need some data. When the lawyer comes to court and wants to prove somebody guilty, they need evidence, right? But here's the thing. If you don't trust the person that is giving you the facts, you're not going to listen. So the speaker's credibility is an important part of the persuasive effort. Think about someone that you've caught in a lie before. Their credibility is damaged. Even if they present an argument to you that has really great facts, there's always this lingering concern that they're not being honest, right? So what are some things that authors do to prove that they're credible? Well, if you see an author that has credentials after their name, like a master's degree or a PhD related to the topic they're writing about, that gives them some credibility. A lot of times, particularly when you're talking about written rhetoric like op-eds, like the ones you'll like the ones, one of which you'll write the paper about. Most op-eds have what's called a byline, where they give you some information about the author that sort of convinces you that's why this is someone worth listening to. All three of those articles include what's called a byline in italics, which gives you some information about the author, which shows why they're credible to write about the topic of CTE in the NFL. So that's appeals to ethos. Lastly, we can't forget appeals to pathos. These are emotional appeals. Because here's the thing, there are so many different arguments out there. There are so many different causes, if you will, vying for your attention, that someone can have a really great argument with lots of facts. They can be highly credible, but if they have not shown you why you should care, if they have not connected with you on a human level, most people will just not pay attention. So appeals to pathos are important as well. When you think about television advertisements, they do have facts, right? They do have appeals to logos, facts about how fast the car goes, but they're very heavy on appeals to pathos, right? They have fun music, they have scenes showing the car going fast, or they have things that are very funny to make us remember them, like the Geico commercials or the Progressive commercials. These are appeals to pathos, right? And indeed, in all three of the New York Times op-eds about the NFL, all three of those have appeals to pathos, right? When Marcus Koch includes details that make you sad or make you feel uncomfortable, when he details excruciating player injuries, when he has sections in there that make you feel sad for them, that's an appeal to pathos. We're always talking about specific sentences you want to point at. When we talk about the rhetorical appeals, you'll use short quotes to point at things in the article and talk about them. With appeals to pathos, sometimes it even comes down to specific word choice, right? All right, so I just went ahead and pulled up the article here. This is one of the three articles you have to choose from when you write the rhetorical analysis paper. And as I mentioned, all three of them have plenty of examples of the rhetorical appeals. You just want to choose the one you understand the best, that you have the most to say about. But anyway, we were talking about appeals to pathos, and I think that when here's an example from Latria Graham's article, right? When she talks about what happens to Junior Seau, and she mentions that he committed suicide, that's a sad event, but it's factual. It's an appeal to logos. But when she talks about the heartbreak that his family endured, that word heartbreak is designed to make us feel sad. Referencing his family members that are left behind is designed to make us feel empathy towards him and sadness for what has happened to them. And it's designed to, overall, it gets us to pay attention to her point, right? That's appeals to pathos. So you see how appeals, this is why I wanted to pull this up, because appeals to pathos often can come out in, again, specific word choice. Okay, so again, I probably shouldn't have used a Venn diagram to illustrate this, because it's not like successful arguments have some kind of perfect balance of all of these, right? Each of our authors that you have to choose from has a different approach. Washington is heavy on logos, has less pathos. Koch is the opposite. He's very heavy on pathos, but he does have appeals to logos because he uses lots of examples of these horrific injuries that happen to players, right? Graham is a journalist, right? So she's got a different kind of credibility than the other two, and she's really balanced in terms of her efforts to use both appeals to logos and pathos. Remember, you're writing about one and only one of those articles. And like I said, I do think that you might want to watch this again after you've read the articles and decided which you want to write about, all right, so that you can kind of get a jump start on getting the paper started. That's about all I've got. Keep clicking next to see those instructions for the paper and to get into more assignments for this week. including the check-in quiz, the discussion board, MLA formatting. Lots to do. Definitely reach out to me if you need help. That's all I got. Thanks. Bye.